Following the 3-day period of reflection on national healing and reconciliation, the question of how to deal with perpetrators or compensate victims remains unanswered. Speaking yesterday in Gweru, Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai called the process, quote, delicate, given the need to balance national healing and non-retributive justice with the legitimate demands of victims of violence. President Robert Mugabe, whose supporters are widely considered to have committed most of the violence, acknowledges violence occurred, but is saying Zimbabwe must forgive and move on. To look deeper into this issue, we turn this week to Clement Moyo, chairman of the Mediation for Peace Center in Bulawayo, who has worked for 2 decades with the victims of the 1980s Kukrawundi purge in Matabeleland, and political analyst Gladys Hlachwai of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition. Moyo tells Studio 7 that President Mugabe should apologize to the victims, which for many of them would be a sufficient gesture.
The president should be seen deep in the rural areas, thinking about the national healing, apologizing for the mishap. Then these other people these big political parties have chosen can then go in conjunction with church organizations and NGO and form some bodies that would try and exercise the actual national healing part.
Who should pay compensation and what should be done to the perpetrators of violence?
If you properly apologize, you don't have to pay reparation. And if those people that actually have done the act of violence so severe are seen in the public, really down to earth and apologizing for what they've done, I think we have a start. Why should we speak about paying first before we do anything?
Has President Mugabe not acknowledged this by declaring the formation of this national organ on reconciliation? Is that not enough?
Rusere, that alone is not enough. I'm telling you, I've had this experience before. The president was asked to apologize about the Kukrawundi atrocity. He didn't, and that thing will never die down. It will never go away in the minds of the people. I've been in the research areas in Jersey. The people are still very angry. They need that simple word of saying, we are sorry this thing ever happened, and we hope it doesn't happen again. That is motive on its own.
Ms. Hlachwai, what are your thoughts on this? Because Prime Minister Tsvangirai has acknowledged this is a delicate balancing act.
There is no way that the nation can heal without truth and justice. National healing is a process, and actually it's an end product of a process. And that process must include mechanisms, both retributive mechanisms and restorative mechanisms, to make sure that Zimbabweans heal. I was a bit disturbed by the move by the government to just declare 3 days of national healing as if it's just an event of some sort. It's very difficult because you have a government where we have both perpetrators and victims. Whilst the victims will be pushing for a more retributive, sense of justice, the perpetrators will be going more on the restorative side.
While still on those 3 days, how was the response?
They didn't achieve much, because from a civil society perspective, we saw the 3 days as 3 days of posturing and political expedience without necessarily dealing with the fundamental issues.
What about perpetrators? How can they be rehabilitated?
At times, patients, you need psychologists. The death of people is not something small. That's what you probably need. And I think bringing these people to the public and them apologizing is also another punishment enough. It might not be enough in the eyes of the victim, but I think if a start is done on those lines, I think some progress may be achieved.
Ms. Hlachwai,
we cannot separate this process from the goings-on as we are speaking. We have MPs being arrested, clearly trumped up charges. And in my opinion, I think the government must demonstrate a sincerity towards the process of national healing by actually stopping or ceasing the current political persecutions, for us to see that the government is actually concerned in making sure that the process actually moves forward.
Mr. Moyo, Zimbabwe is largely a Christian nation, and a large part of its population is also traditional. Which one of the two is the best process?
I think the traditional one is the key one.
Clement Moyo, chairman of the Mediation for Peace Center in Bulawayo. You also heard from advocacy officer Gladys Hlachwai of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition in Harare.